All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Murachs HTML5 and CSS3 3rd edition for the AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Technologies class. And I'm up to Chapter 4, and really Chapters 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all on the subject of CSS or cascading style sheets. Now this one is really on how to use CSS elements, but I kind of renamed it Intro to CSS. All right, even though we did have pretty much an intro in the last chapter. So we've got what? 12 again, knowledge objectives and 3 applied objectives. Applied. Given an HTML document, create a CSS style sheet. Given an HTML document with one or more style sheets applied to it, use the developer tools to inspect said styles. Given a selector in the CSS for an HTML document, describe what the selector applies to. And for our 12 knowledge objectives, describe the 3 ways that you could include CSS in a web page. Explain why it's usually best to use an external style sheet for formatting a page. Describe the changes you need to make to the HTML and CSS files if you want to use CSS to format HTML5 semantic elements in pre-IE9 for Internet Explorer. Describe what a normalized .css style sheet is. Distinguish between absolute, which are pixels or points, as opposed to relative, which are percentages and ems, units of measurement. Describe 3 different ways to specify color. Describe universal selectors, type selectors, ID selectors, class selectors, descendant selectors, child selectors, sibling selectors, pseudo-class selectors, and pseudo-element selectors. Describe an accessibility guideline for using pseudo-class selectors. Explain how you can use the exclamation point important rules, basically for lack of better words, to force something to happen. Also talk about user style sheets and specificity. Describe the font family, font style, font size, font weight, and line height properties for styling fonts. Describe the text indent, text align, text decoration, and text shadow properties for formatting text. All right. Oops. Great. My guess is this will probably take 2 different. Again, I will probably have to break this up over 2 slides. Now, 3 ways to provide styles. You can see them on here, but I want to show them to you using what we have been working on, if I can find it. I did some rearranging of stuff in here, which I probably shouldn't have done, but so I'm looking for index.html and style.html, which of course right now I cannot find. That isn't good. Okay, so that's one of them. And hopefully, at least, it says that's on the desktop already. Hopefully that's the other one. Okay, it's already there. Okay, so let's open these both up. And this was all the stuff from the last chapter, so I'm not going to worry about any of that. In fact, I can take these images. If you remember, I did the images with the puppy. So that's all done. So right now, let's open from here also. Should be style.css, and there it is. All right. Let's not use the red color. This is how you comment things out in CSS. We can keep those blue, that's fine. And I'm going to get rid of these things in here too. So just because we're doing other stuff now, that's the only reason. In fact, let's just remove everything, and we'll comment all of it out. So I'm commenting the whole thing out there. All right, so right now, that's not what I want to do. There you go. So right now I have basically no style sheet, and I have basically, this is index copy, but no biggie. All right, so if I save these both, and I think I have, and I run this, absolutely nothing comes up. And that's exactly what I want. Okay? All right. This is, I'm working on producing something else, so. All right, so let's talk about 3 different ways. So let's just put a simple paragraph into our document, okay? Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party, all right? So let's talk about the 3 different ways. Let's suppose first time I want to make this text in here red. All right, well, one way that I can do that, we've kind of looked at this before. I'm going to grab this code and I'm going to put it right there. All right, and I'm not going to say font size, but I'm just going to say here color red. All right, let's see if that worked. And I don't need that. There we go. All right, so let's see when I run this if the paragraph indeed is red. And it is. Now is the time for all good people to come to the aid of their party. I don't know why that's so small, but it is. There's bigger. All right? So that's the first thing. So that's one way I can do it. And that's called inline CSS, where I'm putting the CSS right in here. This is considered the worst way of doing things because I'm directly mixing CSS, Cascade Style Sheets, I'm directly mixing it inside of the actual HTML elements itself. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save that, and notice that when I run it again, now it's black again. Good, that's what I wanted. All right, another way I can do that is I can come in, and in the head section I can put in what are called style tags. And I can put in any CSS I want between those style tags. All right, so I'm just going to come in here and say color red. Now, I gotta tell it what I want to have colored red. So P for paragraph. All right, so this is saying that I want my paragraphs to be colored in red. Save this and run it. It should be back to red again. And you can see that it is. That's called internal CSS. First one was inline, where I put it here, right in the tag itself. This is internal. But if I pull that information out, grab the actual, just the virgin, so to speak, CSS, and put it into my file here. All right. So right now, this is all, literally, this is all that is in my style.css file right there. And then I add my style.css file with a link tag. What you'll notice is, again, the paragraph should be red. That's called using external CSS. So the 3 types of CSS that you can possibly use, oops, leave this open, sorry, are referred to. This right here is an example. Okay, that's an example of inline CSS. I'm putting it right in this case, it's right in the sentence itself. All right, then I put it up here in style tags. So that was inline. This is internal. And then finally I put it in its own external file. That's considered the best way of doing it, because what I'm doing then is I am segregating as much as possible the CSS from the HTML. So those are the three ways. There the author shows it also. Now, the reason this is called cascading style sheets, as it says here, here's the sequence in which styles are applied. If there's any external styles, they're done first. Then the embedded or internal styles, as I call them, are done second. Then the inline styles are done last. So it goes from the most general in an external file to just for the current file to just for the current element. It is totally legit to include more than one style sheet. Now, I've only shown one in mine because we only had one that we created. Not only that, as you'll see as we go on, quite often you'll have one style sheet that you create that is for showing it on screen, as we've been doing, and you create another one for print. We'll talk about that either later in this chapter or in another chapter. So again, the first thing that gets applied is the external. That gets overridden by the internal. That gets overridden by the inline. Now they talk here about this shiv, sometimes called a shim. So this is either, depending on the book you read, has got an M there or a V there. And it's for older versions of IE, versions of Internet Explorer before IE9. Unfortunately, there are still some people out there using those older versions. And when that happens, and you put HTML5 elements, like the header, the footer, the main, etc., that we've looked at in other chapters, when you put those elements in there, the system gets confused because it doesn't know how to render those. All right, this just basically says if you don't know how to render them, okay, as much as possible, it's telling them to recognize them as much as you possibly can. So here it is in more detail. As it says, it forces, I'd put that word in double quotes, the older versions of IE to recognize the HTML semantic elements and let you apply CSS to these elements. So as it says, the effect is it adds semantic elements to the DOM, which we'll cover in a later chapter. The DOM is the document object model, and that's basically a model that gets built for every web page. We'll talk about it later. And it also adds a CSS rule set that tells the browser to treat HTML5 elements as block elements, meaning they have that blank line before and after them rather than inline elements. All right? Now, I want to show you something, okay? And that is, let's go in and it's related to this. So just hold on for a second here. So I'm going to go back to my style sheet, or to my page that I had before. I'm going to copy comment out the link to the style sheet. All right? So now I have no styling in there whatsoever. Now I'm going to take everything from the last chapter and I'm going to comment it back in, for lack of better words. All right, and save this. And I'm going to run the page. And you see there's a lot of stuff on it now. Okay? Now, I somehow lost my images. I think I removed those images. I'm sorry about that. And that's why, okay, that's why they're not showing. But that really doesn't matter. What I want you to know is there actually is some styling that gets applied here by the browser. You notice that nothing is touching here. All right? So in other words, there is some styling that's still being applied. How do I know that? Well, I'm going to come back in here and go back to our text now. And I want to grab this line right here. Rather than monkeying with it, let me grab it like this. So I'm going to grab http://nicolas.github.io/normalize reset.css. All right, now I'm going to come into our file, and this was the link we had in there, but instead I'm going to put in this link, link, rel equals style sheet, href equals this file. All right, and I'm going to save. Now I'm going to go back to my file, okay, and I'm going to reload, and watch how this stuff moves. All right, so make me a layer. href equals // make sure I put the right path in there. Should have just copied it to begin with. And if this doesn't work for whatever reason, we'll get it to work. All right, so let me get rid of this. All right, let's save, and let's try to refresh it again. All right, nothing happened. I'm not sure why, so let's do this. All right, there is another file that's like a normalized file that I think will do something here, but we'll find out. Eric Meyer CSS resets. All right, this is Eric Meyer's CSS reset file. I'm going to grab this entire file, copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to add a new file here, paste it in. We'll go back and look at it in just a moment, but we're going to call this reset.css. Okay? All right, now we'll come here and we'll just type in here reset.css. There's a method to my madness if you just bear with me for a minute. Now let's refresh and see if anything moves. See that? That removed any and all formatting that the browser put in for us by default. And that's an unbelievably big change. Again, if you don't think it is, let me go back again and take that line of code that we just put in, and then let's comment it out. All right, still looks ugly, but when we refresh, all right, that is all the formatting that the browser itself put in. All right, so when you use a file like Eric Meyer's CSS reset, what that file does is it basically removes all of the browser defaults. Here it's saying for virtually every kind of HTML tag there is, have there be no margin, no padding, we're going to talk about these in the next chapter, no border, make the font size 100%, we'll talk about inherit later, vertical align it, all right, display it block, have a line height be basically 100%, no list styles, no block quotes, all right, so that it's basically turning off every default you can virtually think of. So when you do that, again, it goes from this to that. All right, and that typically what you want to do, quite often what people do, is they come in and the first thing they do is literally do that CSS reset. Then underneath that, they put in their own CSS file. Now remember, I think all we have in this file now is to turn our text color red or something like that. I don't even remember what it is. All right. So our paragraphs were supposed to be red, but nothing else changed. So now what happens when you put in this file, and again, let's comment this one out. When you put in that CSS reset file, what you're able to do, for lack of better words, is start with a clean slate. All right, that's considered, very, very good practice. All right. So let's go back to our slideshow. And I think I just pretty much talked to you about this, okay? All right. So, as it says, it makes minor adjustments. Okay. The normalize, well, that didn't work, and I don't know why. So let's just jump into common units of measure. The first two units that are shown here, px, px, and points, pts, they're both absolute types of measurements. So with absolute types of measurements like these two, all right, what it says is it doesn't care what kind of device you're using. A pixel is a pixel, a point is a point. So always attempt to show something at its absolute size. On the other hand, m's and percents are relative, which means try to put it relative to the medium in which you're using to view something. So, excuse me, an M for a phone might look different than an M on a laptop or a desktop, for example. All right. So here's some HTML, as it says, for a web page. And here's some CSS that they're using to work on it. Let's try to use their example for a change, because I've been doing my own. So we will grab, we will grab this code here. Just put it into a brand new file. Now, when I do this, I have a lot of stuff missing here. In other words, I don't have my doc type tag in here, my head stuff, so I'm going to just grab that from here. Put that in there. And then for the bottom, I don't have my ending HTML tag. I could have just manually put it in, which I guess would have been a lot faster. But, all right. So now if I save this, and I'm going to call this style 2, which I'm going to create in just a minute. But I'm going to save this to my desktop, and I'm going to call it index2.html. Okay, that's good. And again, in just a minute, we're going to create the style 2 CSS file by copying that from the next slide, right here. You see, this doesn't work very good for copy and paste in here. All right, so there, and this isn't formatted really at all. So I'm going to put just a little bit of formatting in here so it looks a little nicer and is a little easier to read if we do go back and talk about any of it. There. So this will become style 2 .css. All right. So these are our style rules. 100% font size, some margin. Our headers should have some padding and some and no margin. And our H1 tags should have no margin and be double the regular size. So that takes this, and once we apply that to it, so we have now saved this. So now let's save this and run it. And that's what you get. Okay? Now, how close is that to what they show in the book? Pretty much looks the same way. All right? Let's talk about colors. All right. So far, when I've changed the color, I've done it this way. I've used a color name, but you don't have to do that. Okay. You can use RGB, which stands for red, green, blue. And when you use red, green, blue, you can use either percentages. So that's 100% red, 40% green, and 20% blue. Or you can use the numerical equivalent. 255 is the max. So 255 is 100%, 102 is 40%, 51 is 20%. So either one of these should result in that color. You can also use RGB, but with what are called hexadecimal or base 16 values. FF is the first one. These two Fs. These two Fs are the green. These two Fs are the blue. So this would be white because that's total red, total green, total blue. A total saturation means white. This means having none of it. No red, no green, no blue, which means black. This means 100% red, no green, no blue, which in other words says it's going to be red. So when I showed you this before in our our style sheet where we did color red, I could have also said color instead of red. We could have said RGB 100%, 0%, 0%. I don't normally do it that way, but this should work okay. We'll find out. So let's see if it makes our paragraphs red. And you can see that it does. All right. I could have also gone in, instead of doing that, let's make it a different color than red so you can see it. So if we make it no red, all green, all blue, what's that going to do? It's going to combine green and blue together. And when you combine green and blue together, you get, according to this, nothing. Because you need a pound sign there. In fact, when you do this, you don't use RGB. You just do it like this. Oops. There we go. So what color is this going to give us? Kind of a aqua. All right. And what we're going to see in just a minute is not only can you use all that, but you can put in here, instead of putting in just RGB, all right, and putting in, for example, let's use the same ones we just used. So 0%, 100%, 100%. Now that should be the same aqua that we just saw. Okay? So that's been saved. When we bring this up and we refresh, it shouldn't look any different. Well, it does. Because I didn't put in my closing tag. Now let's try it. It's good when you make mistakes like this. It is. Now they're aqua again. All right? Now let's put it into a color so you can actually see it. So we'll just make it green. So that should turn all these aqua paragraphs into green. And it does. All right. And let's put RGBA, which means how much alpha. So notice what happens when I put this in here. I'm going to put it here, 0.33. All right. That might not make any sense, but hopefully it will in a minute. See what this looks like? Now what happens when I refresh? Now it's harder to see. I've said I only want the opacity of it, all right, to be 1/3 of what it normally is. So it is 2/3 transparent and 1/3 opaque. All right. That A stands for how much alpha it goes in there. So I think I've kind of beat that to death. Here are some of the descriptive color names. There's more than this. I think there was last time I read, there must be somewhere around 140 colors. You can put in stuff like, I don't know, saffron or something like that. So there's different colors that you can use. All right, so I showed you some of these. as it says, make sure 10% approximately of the people in the world are colorblind. So you want to make sure that for those people that you don't put a background and a color on it that is so hard to read that it's so close to each other that you can't read it. All right? So as it says, dark text on a light background is typically easier to read. Black type on a white background is the easiest to read, but it's also the least appealing visually. So I showed you the RGBA. There's also something called HSL and HSLA. HSL is hue, saturation, and light. And it works very similarly, but it's a little bit more complex, and we'll look at it in class, but I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I mentioned opacity to you already. Here's some different examples that you can use and some different stuff, so to speak, that you can do with it. All right? So let's jump back into talking about IDs and classes, and let me check my time. Oh, I'm at 31 minutes already, so I'm going to pick that up in the next lecture.